Hey everyone, and welcome to day 3 of Creatio's Low Code Marathon. It's been an exciting week so far. We've had some great presentations, and day 3 promises not to disappoint. So we'll go ahead and go through the agenda for today. If I can move my screen, a little bit of technical difficulty here. There we go. Sorry about that, folks. So for the agenda today, we have, again, 3 sessions. Day 3, 3 sessions. We have Leading a Digital First Culture. We'll be joined by Dr. Chris Perry. Our second session, Digital by Design. We'll have Jim Love joining us to talk about building data-driven organizations. And our third session will be a roundtable with some of my colleagues from our partner channels. So should be a great discussion, and I look forward to engaging with them shortly here. So yesterday we had a quiz, as we're doing daily. Each day we'll be asking a question, having you submit your answers through chat, and our winners will be getting some fabulous prizes. So yesterday was no exception. If anybody was in attendance yesterday, you remember the question was, what value will the low-code market reach in 2030? And the correct answer was $187 billion. So just a huge uptick by 2030. And we had several correct answers in the chat, but we randomly selected 3. And Brian Anderson, Eric Lazenby, and Shini Rajas. So you will be getting an email with details on your prize shortly, so congratulations. And this is a reminder to the rest of the audience that we will be conducting a quiz today and announcing the winners tomorrow. So there's some encouragement to join tomorrow's session as well. All right. I would also like to remind the audience that if you have questions for our speakers and our panelists, please submit those questions in the chat area, and I will do my best to facilitate them to the team. So why don't we go ahead and get started with day 3. All right, so that brings us to our first speaker, who I'm joined with on the screen here, Dr. Chris Perry. Dr. Chris Perry is an amazing individual. He's got a storied past. We've known each other for a while, Chris, here. So I know you're a great background. Award-winning author, British Naval Admiral, doctor. Strategist, you name it, Chris has it on his resume. So welcome, Chris. Thank you again for joining us.
Good. Well, hello, everybody, and thanks very much indeed for coming to this great event. What I want to stress in my short piece today is that we talk a lot about technology, we talk about systems, we talk about design, we talk about everything else. But we forget about human beings, and we're doing this for and by human beings. And one of the things I'd like to introduce from my background is the fact that life actually in business is a battlefield. And I want to introduce you to some of the concepts that are used in military life that enable us to deal with complex problems, absorb technology, and make sure that our competitors don't get the better of us, because we don't get any prizes for coming second, obviously, in warfare. And what I want to do is draw on the fact that ships, for a long time, have been both a means of transport, fighting platforms, but also communities as well. As you can see on these Viking ships, it's part of a community. And what I'll do is draw parallels between modern ships. Here's a modern warship of the Royal Navy, and it's HMS Dragon. As you can see, they've got a dragon on their bow, and they look quite sort of sexy, actually, and effective as well. And one of the things I want to really start with is the idea that in the modern world, Leadership is not linear, it's distributed. And it's distributed like we are today across many continents, across many technologies and many systems. But again, the linkages that hold all that together are essentially human. And the way we interact and the way we cooperate as human beings in either warfare or in technology is going to be vitally important as that technology accelerates into the 21st century. So what is making this leadership distributed? And while I'm talking on this slide, just have a look at the list of connections that had to be proved in the Enron scandal as being connected to Kenneth Lay, the CEO. And this shows you the complexity even in 1999 when the Enron scandal started to break. But it's even more intense nowadays. Why? Because we're working from home and on the move. We're increasing our use of distributed learning and multi-channel communications over many sites. We're about to absorb virtual, mixed, and augmented reality. So the sort of VTCs that you're used to are going to be a thing of the past soon. And some of us are incorporating digital assistants. So the interface between people more and more is becoming one of technology as well as human experience. That's leading to multi-layered psychological and systemic networks and altering the balance of our life and our work in the way we're operating. We're developing new working patterns. And what I like to stress nowadays is that human beings have a lower footprint, but they're seeking to have a higher impact. And technology is enabling us to have that higher impact with a lower footprint. So you don't have to be everywhere at once. And the guide that I'm giving to all the people that I advise at the moment is that you should have a grip on your organization that is authoritarian, you know what's going on, but you should decentralize your operation as far as possible. And of course, technology makes that possible. But at every level, you have to remain cognizant of the fact that humans are working in this system. So let's have a look at humans and machines. What's going on here? Well, autonomous systems and AI-powered robotics, all associated in the future with lower coding, are replacing manual tasks. That's a simple fact. Okay, but less than 5% of jobs consist of activities that are 100% automated. And people overestimated the extent to which these things can be absorbed 100%. And the thing we have to remember is that automation replaces tasks. It does not replace work. That is the job, if you like, of human beings. And traditional human-machine interfaces like cobots and holobots that are coming in at the moment can't effectively contextualize and interact with future workflows, which now include, as I say, physical and digital work information. And what we're going to need in future is a constant cross-exchange of information and new methods of interactions to enable on-demand, in-context interfacing between human oversight and instruct capabilities. Without that, you'll have no assurance that A, your technology is not losing its integrity, but also that the tasks and outcomes that you want it to do are in fact being achieved. Okay, let's have a look at home working, because this has become very traditional over the years, but actually intensified in the last year and a half because of COVID. And there are some simple facts about home working that we need to show. All of you will know that we've got serious social dislocation as a result, and the normal means by which we interact have essentially been truncated. The whole business of body language has disappeared because instead of acting as human beings, we're acting really as avatars. And you'll all have had your problems with cameras off and the muting switches and things like that. And the fact of life is that interactions are linear. They are not synchronized as we are used to. And the other issue is with digital immersion is the parts of your brain that engage socially are disengaged when you're working on a screen. This even extends to the fact that if you are reading data from a screen, the circuits in your brain that are associated with memory do not energize. So all those social interactions, all those learning functions that you're used to in real life are not alerting. It's a very shallow immersion that you're having in relation to video conferencing. Also, something else that I'm studying at the moment is called digital neglect. Because one is so immersed in the digital world, everything else around you, you're feeding, looking after the kids, taking the dog for a walk, is getting neglected. So all the things that buttress your normal emotional and psychological security are being neglected. And that even extends, I'm afraid, to creativity. So this industry has a great reputation for innovation, for forward thinking. I can tell you now, because of this lack of human contact, we are seeing a considerable reduction in the amount of creativity that's being involved. And dare I say it, the emotional quotient, not just loneliness. This is associated with the sort of good things that you get in your brain, the chemicals and enzymes that make you feel good when you're associated with other people looking at you in a favorable way, interacting with you positively. We've lost all of that. And this needs to be built back into what we're doing. And what we're finding is because people are at home all day, they're exposed to digital devices, they're on call, if you like, for work all the time, they're lacking that ability to switch off by commuting every day. I mean, I'm lucky, I commute every day 20 yards up my garden to where I work. So I can actually say I'm commuting, but believe it or not, that commuting space acted, if you like, as a buffer between you and your job. And what we're seeing with a lot of people working from home is burnout. The technology can always work faster than human beings. And one of the things I'm asking people now, to what extent is the company you're working for responsible for all of this? Because what it could lead to is litigation. So what's my advice on this one? Okay, work is not where you go to. It's something that you do. Got to get that in your mind. Beyond about 9 working hours a day, you are counterproductive. You're only about 40% efficient if you're working more than 9 hours a day. And that includes being on call for your digital devices as well. What you have to do is look at priorities and values, basically in excess of your duties and locations. I can't stress this enough. Priorities and values, and particularly in relation to productivity and outcomes over hours worked. If you are starting to fall off towards the end of the day in terms of outcomes, you have to stop. It's as simple as that. And what I'm saying to people now, particularly in a distributed leadership role, is outcomes and results should be the only criteria on which you judge people and the way they're working. How they do it, where they do it, how long they do it is no longer important. We know technology can stay on 24 hours a day, human beings can't. And I'm saying now, schedule work around your life, not the other way around. Get out into the real world, particularly in relation to the people you work with. You do have to see them. It's as simple as that. And a couple of things that I think are worth mentioning here, and it is really important, is that you end up in a situation, if you don't get out of this immersive cycle, that your children are 2 or 3 times more likely to have addiction or alcohol problems as a result of this lack of exposure to their real parents. And that must be a real worry. And sleep. If you're not getting enough sleep, you are really banking up serious problems for yourself. Why do I say that? You end up in a situation where you get stress and you get strain. There's no therapy for it because you're not sleeping. The sleep is designed to shut down elements of energy-intensive brain cells. It results in information processing, defragging, if you like, and that's what you have dreams for, so you can defrag quite a lot of the stress of everyday life. But the most important aspects of sleep are they clear out the macromolecular junk by dilating your lymph vessels. Now, what does that mean? It gets rid of the plaque that builds up in your brain, just like there's plaque on your teeth. And there's good research at the moment showing that if you don't get rid of that plaque over time, it can lead to dementia in later life. So watch out for that. And finally, of course, it allows rewiring of your brain to prevent overcrowding, such that you're producing quality and not just a quantity of trivia and other things like that. So it's really important that you get your sleep and quality sleep at that. And of course, again, if all this happens to you, where's the company's responsibility, even though you're working from home? Nobody seems to deal with that. Okay, let's talk about strategy. You can read over 30,000 books now on Amazon. Here are some of them on the right-hand side. But I'm going to tell you, never read a strategy book again, because this is what strategy is about. This is solely what you should be thinking about. It's what ensures the survival and sustained success of a country, organization, or enterprise. That's all you need to know. Two things. Now, most people are concentrated on survival. If you don't invest something in sustained success, you'll be fighting a survival battle every day of the week. So even if you're actually investing 95% in survival, spare something for sustained success, whether it's training, whether it's investment, something. Otherwise, you won't have a tomorrow to have a strategy for. Okay, and really what strategy is about, whether you're doing sales, whether you're doing long-term projection, you're turning an undesirable situation, where I am now, into a desirable situation. So it's a journey, and it has three elements. You have outcomes that support that favorable situation that you want to get to. You have the means, which are both human and also financial and material. And you have ways, the practical ways through technology or other means that you can actually make things happen. And essentially, when you're assessing all of this, it's got to be a balance. So somewhere you've got to sit in the middle of all this and trade off outcomes with means and ways to achieve them. It's as simple as that. What defines a good outcome? Okay, in balancing these outcomes, ways and means, it's confidence that the requirements and needs of the task, the individual and the team are met both this time and in preparation for the next. This is the mistake most people make. Remember what I said about survival? That's this time, and in preparation for the next, okay, in future, okay, sustainable success. And what I ask people a lot in human terms is, where does everybody sit between these three things? You should sit in the middle. It's as simple as that. So you balance everything out. But how often do you have the team working on the problem, the leadership seeking the solution, and nobody achieves the outcome? Also, okay, the leadership's working very hard on the outcome and the solution, and the team is working on the outcome, and everybody forgets what the problem was in the first place. So you're not actually traveling from one to the other. And as I said, that's where you should be, with your team in the middle of the outcome, the problem, and the solution. If you're not invested in all three in a balanced way, you'll never achieve this, particularly in an accelerated environment. So let's have a look at a few principles of warfare, shall we, and see how they apply here. The most important thing is selection and maintenance of the aim. I see a lot of companies with lots of aims, but the fact of life is, if you have split aims, you'll end up putting your resources, all those ways and means, into producing lots of aims. You'll be confused. So one aim. What's a good aim? To make 500 million by 2025. Very simple. And you have a series of objectives and outcomes that support that aim. So your favorable situation is that shed load of money that you want to achieve by 2025. Be upfront, be honest about it. Take time working out what that aim is. Maintenance of morale, very important indeed, whether it's military, whether it's in your companies. And this is a leadership function, and it relies on internal and external communication to make sure that people feel good about what they're doing, they have significance, and they feel good about the team around them. Do not confuse morale with happiness. People don't have to be happy. Morale is defined as being trained, being equipped, and being prepared to do what is necessary on behalf of themselves and also the team in support of objectives. I remember when I was in Afghanistan, we had politicians come and say, they don't seem very happy here. And we said, no, but their morale's high because they're equipped, they know what they're doing. But if you're on the danger line every day, you're not going to be that happy, to tell you the truth. So there's a difference between morale and happiness. Don't confuse it. Leaders take the shortcut to happiness. They provide donuts, they provide all sorts of other things. It doesn't actually produce morale. Internal reinforcement is a really important part of morale. You want to garner goodwill, sense of loyalty, and that is brought about by shared success, shared experience, professional ethos, self and collective esteem. You've got to feel good about yourselves. A track record of success is great. Tradition, collective memory, learning lessons together when you get it wrong. And finally, of course, you define yourself in terms of the other, your competition, and also your customers. we're not like them. We're much better than that, and we can do good for them as well. Important thing that you need in military action, of course, is decisive action. If you're constantly deferring decisions, you're never going to get anywhere. It's as simple as that. So somebody has to make decisions at every level, and where that is appropriate, leaders have to do that. Concentration of force. You can see on the left-hand side, if you can actually achieve a result, you need to concentrate force. If you don't, you're likely to be seen off by your competitors. But of course, you mustn't overdo it. You must choose the point at which you have to apply force or investment or anything like that, and make sure that it's proportionate. Why is that? Because let's have a look at sales, shall we? All these things have to be applied if you're going to be a successful salesman. You can apply this to any one of your disciplines in the company, okay? But just look at the complexity and concentration that is required of all these aspects. They mustn't do it in silos. They have to do it together, and someone has to coordinate this activity. That is the role of the leader. And it's balanced, of course, by economy of effort. It's very good concentrating force, but if you've only done it for the one thing, like sales, there'll be precious little resource to actually do anything else as well. And Winston Churchill's quite right here. Never use more than you have to in relation to any particular task that you're used to. And of course, life never, ever rolls out as you expect it to. So you have to have sufficient flexibility and agility in your plans to make sure that if things do go wrong, you have capacity for the unexpected. Because if you don't, that rigid system will collapse in the face of reality. A very famous German general, he said, "No plan survives first contact with the enemy." Well, my experience is that no plan in business survives first contact with reality. So you have to have the ability to adjust, and that's why you need to decentralize leadership downwards to make sure that people can take action quickly and in an agile way to cover for the unexpected. And all this means that you have to have cooperation. And this is cooperation with your partners, your customers in some cases, but most importantly, within your own systems. Now, a lot of cooperation is assumed digitally, but of course, people can hide behind that. And unless you have effective collaboration between business units and between people in those business units, you're not going to prevail in this accelerated environment. And cooperation means constant internal communication. It also needs understanding of what is going on at each stage. So when you can do, get back and start walking the ground, because you have to meet people to know what their emotional, psychological, and collective needs are. And part of that is having the ability to absorb dissent. If you're not an organization that actually can take dissent, obviously, once decisions are made, you expect loyalty, but right up to the point of decision, you've got to have the ability for people to say, we don't think this is right. What we employ in the military is a thing called a red team, constantly playing the part of the enemy or your competition. And if you don't have somebody playing the part of your competition, you won't see some of the things that you should do in relation to prevailing in those circumstances. Security. I can't stress enough that in an accelerated environment, getting to market is really important. You all know this, but unless you have security, and the best security actually is knowing your people, you're never going to be in a position ever again to be able to get to market before your opposition. This is particularly so in the cybersphere, but believe it or not, most industrial espionage it takes place, more than 2/3 in fact, by insiders who actually do physical espionage in relation to your products, in relation to your competitive approaches. And of course, if you can, the ability to surprise your opponent or your competitor is a key component, particularly in warfare, but also in business as well. So if you can do that, you'll have achieved almost everything that I've been talking about. But don't forget, you're not just a one-hit wonder. You've actually got to sustain it over time. It's no good putting yourself in for a 100 meters race and suddenly realizing that the race is actually a marathon, because you won't actually make it, as you know. And you've got to make sure, as I said all the way through, it's not just for this time, but also for the next time as well. And some of the things that I recommend, and you can have a look at this now at your leisure, okay, is a framework for competitive sales that looks on in this way. And this is exactly what the military does in these circumstances. Just have a read for it yourself before we go through. Okay, so you've got to have an insight team that focuses on finding actually what's going on out there. Let's have a look at the context in which we're working. Okay, you've got to have a planning team that says, well, if that's the context, then this is what we have to do to create the scenarios in which we can operate, see where our strengths and weaknesses are, and then go for it. Then you have an operations team that actually delivers the outcomes by harnessing the ways and means that we've identified. And then we have a communications team that has a spelling error in it, actually, that is involved in internal and external communications. And that means internal communication to make sure the lubrication is working, external communications to influence decisions by outside players, to make sure that your objectives and outcomes are achieved. And of course, all of this relies on leadership. If you don't have leadership to knit this together, none of this is going to be worthwhile. And what are we looking for now in leadership in this new environment? Well, the first thing I always say to people is if you're a leader, it's not about you. It's actually about the objectives and the people you're leading. You have to accept that everybody counts, more or less in human terms. Of course, everybody is different in functional terms, but you're all part of the same company. And I like to see it that you don't have leaders and led, you have leaders and potential leaders. And if you think that you just are a leader at work, in this modern world, that's not the case. You're a leader 24/7. So if your people need access to you, they need direction, you've got to provide it. It's no good saying, I've got something else to do that doesn't actually apply at work. You've got to be mutually supportive and demanding of each other. You've got to deal with present and future expectations. And if you're a leader, do try and make work fun because you get more out of people in terms of productivity. The most important thing is to give people meaning and significance. If you think they're working for you just because you're the funniest person in the room or the best looking person, don't be deluded. You pay them. And unless you give them meaning or significance, you won't get ordinary people to do extraordinary things. So what's the best thing then? You've got to get the right person in the right place at the right time, whether you're at the top or the bottom of the organization. You have to have personality. It's no good not having a personality. You can have a bad personality as long as people can actually identify that and actually spin off it. And you've got to have the legitimacy that goes with knowing your job and actually saying, I'm here for you, not here for myself. Leaders have to have accountability for outcomes. And just think about it. When you delegate to suitable individuals, what are you delegating? You are not delegating responsibility for outcomes. You are delegating the ways and means. Otherwise, it's abdication. It's not delegation. You've got to have a contextual understanding of where you're going. Remember what I said about the insight team earlier? And you've got to make decisions. Leaders who don't make decisions are not leading, and they shouldn't be in their jobs. You've got to have openness, accessibility, and availability to everybody who can be trusted within your organization. And remember that everybody is there to make a decisive difference. If they don't, they shouldn't be in the job. It's as simple as that. And what does this mean in terms of outcomes? Well, if you focus on outcomes, you've got to give people the resources, you've got to give them the training, and you've also given them the trust to deliver outcomes for you in support of those superior outcomes that you demand. Okay, I said you've got to be authoritarian in an organization, but decentralized in operations. And who does outcomes? Who does ways and means? Everybody can't do all of them, so you've got to sort that out. Everybody has a voice, but not everybody gets to make a decision. That's simple. And let's talk about meetings. If the outcome of a meeting is another meeting, you shouldn't be having a meeting because that's not a decision. Okay, meetings should be about decisions and outcomes. They shouldn't be just an opportunity to gather around the water cooler. And let's talk about vertical and horizontal loyalty. One of the things that really disappointed me, I have to tell you, when I left the Royal Navy, is to find that actually there wasn't a lot of vertical loyalty. Your bosses didn't actually cover you, and quite a lot of your people working for you were after your job. And that sort of loyalty is really important in an accelerated technological environment. And don't forget what I call Kita. It's very motivating. There's both a negative and a positive Kita. What does Kita mean? It means kick in the arse. Okay, positive kick in the arse, we all understand that, but occasionally people do need a negative kick in the arse, because if they're complacent, if they're arrogant, if they're not doing a very good job, sometimes you do have to kick them a little bit hard and say, sorry guys, you're not actually doing this properly. And most importantly, people need to know where they stand. And one of the most disappointing things that I found in technological environments is how poor personal reports are. If you're not giving your people personal reports, how they're actually achieving their objectives, how they're doing things, then again, you're a poor leader. So what's leadership about? Okay, it's everybody's business. Okay, it's not good enough to say, well, my boss does that, okay? If it's business, it's personal. People try and separate it out. It isn't, I'm afraid. If it's business, it is personal, and it's about us, not about us and you. A lot of companies I see think that the management is us and the rest of the people are you. It's not, it's us. And remember, two of the letters in the word trust are US, trust. It's as simple as that. So what about me? What about the individual in all of this? Okay, 3 circles again. Where do you think you are in relation to the outcomes that you're being asked currently to produce on this diagram? Are you out for yourself? Are you looking out for the team, or are you just driving for the outcome? Okay, quite a lot of organizations I know, okay, the leaders are out for themselves, the team is sitting in their circle, and no outcomes get achieved at all. There's no connection between the two. Sometimes you get the leaders really working hard to get the outcome. They're not bringing the team with them, and the outcome suffers as a result. And of course, the answer is you should be smack in the middle with your team if you're leading properly. Anyway, let's give you an example how this works at sea. All right, let's have a go. This is an anti-ship missile that is aiming for this ship. It's normally launched about 60 to 100 miles away. It flies at 12 miles a minute. That means a mile every 5 seconds. So from the time it's launched, that ship that I just showed you has about 5 minutes to react, and 14 actions have to happen in the precise sequence in order for that missile not to hit the ship. Okay, if you don't get it right, you have a close encounter of a rather serious kind, as you can see, and that happens. And that's a bad business day, to tell you the truth, for any company when that happens. Now, as I said to you, the point is, in 5 minutes, 14 people have to take that action. They can't be ordered to do it. It has to be second nature. And all the principles that I showed you apply in this case. Now, here's the real killer. The first action is taken by a 19-year-old. And without that, that ship gets hit. And I ask you, how many decisions like that do you allow 19-year-olds to take in your organization? If there's not many, you need to look at it and say, the world of the 21st century and technology means we have to empower people at every level to make decisions. So to sum up, okay, there's all the things that I've been talking about, that the military does, applies itself in a technological and tactical environment, as you can see. And I can give you this slide so that you actually can think about it in the future. But, you know, without leadership, okay, nothing works at all. And you've got to think about how these things work. So that's a very short, sharp message. I normally do this in about half a day with the people that I lecture, but you've had the, if you like, the distilled wisdom of that in 35 minutes. So if you've got any questions, I'll be delighted to answer them now.
Excellent. Yeah, Chris, the amazing presentation as always. And there are absolutely some questions here in the chat that I can facilitate here for you. So the first question that we have is, what is the most important skill an organization should have to lead a digital culture transformation?
Yeah, I think the most important skill is to recognize the balance of human and technological ability that you have in your company. It's not going to be enough just to have geeks in future. You're going to have to project a human capability in all directions. So the sort of people that you will want to employ and the sort of people you're going to need to spot are those that have the interactive personal skills in relation to the technical and technological skills that they have. We're talking about, I gave a lecture, some of you remember, in October, where we talked about the new age being the Novacene. We're in the Anthropocene at the moment, which is all about humans. The new age is going to be the machine-human interface. And your people are going to have to navigate that interface between human beings and technology. If you can't articulate, explain, mediate, and empower both sides of that line, you'll be out of business. It's as simple as that. How we actually balance that will determine, I think, how much business will prosper or not in future. And you'll notice that the big guys, the Googles and Microsofts, they're all looking at this at the moment in a very intensive way. When you get the Internet of Things, that's going to be even more important. But that human-machine interface will need both evangelists, practitioners, but also, I think, really smooth operators. And you'll be surprised. I mean, let me give you an interesting discussion. John Paul Getty II was once asked why it was in his investment house he employed historians and archaeologists instead of physicists and mathematicians. And his answer was, they make more money. and you know, it's counterintuitive, but that was the case. But you're going to find that you're going to have to employ a range of skills to get technology through that human cranium in future. And that's the biggest skill you need, is to navigate that interface in future and to spot the people that can do it for you.
Right.
I hope that answers the question.
I'm sure it did. That's an amazing answer. Let's see, we've got another good one here. It says, Chris, do you see many organizations embodying the results-only work environment?
No, I'm afraid part of the problem is, and I'm talking about 90% of organizations that I either coach or come across, okay, 90% are more engaged within the organizations in reinforcing the hierarchies than they are in producing the outcomes. And oddly enough, the people that are best placed to produce the outcomes are normally weeded out by the hierarchy because they don't conform, because they won't go along with the plans. One of the things I've got to stress in those principles of warfare is this agility issue. An organization has to recognize where it's not quite on track, where it's not quite dealing with its competitors and things like that. And that needs a really healthy dissent environment. You have to have people come up to you and say, look, you've given me the ways and means to produce this outcome, but I don't believe it is going to produce the outcome. And you've got to, I have to tell you, the United States Navy in World War II was really good at this. And people took decisions locally and then said, look, I did it because of this. You told me what the outcome was. You told me to do it like this. You really shouldn't do that. And that's the case. But I'm afraid to say that most organizations, you know, and they're shocked when I say to them, you know, you're not actually doing this right, because what you're doing is reinforcing the current hierarchy and the current directors, but you're not producing the outcomes. So what do you want to do? Massage your boss's egos or actually produce the outcomes? I'll tell you what will get you sacked, both of them. So it's, again, I get back to this point of navigating the interface between technology and humanity. You have to understand human nature to operate in this high-tech, high-octane environment. Look at your fellow workers. Think about how you achieve those outcomes. Think of those circles that I gave you. And where do you want to put your boss in that? Well, there's only one answer. You've got to make your boss look good. One of the things that I always thought was a good way of looking at this is it doesn't matter who gets the credit as long as you achieve the outcome. It really doesn't. You know, my sort of deal with my bosses was, you know, if we succeed, I need some of this as well. I'll look after you, look after me. But you've got to learn to navigate this. You have to be a human being. You have to actually understand how these things go.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I've got a ton more questions here, Chris, but I've got the big red light flashing above me here. As always, very insightful. There are great comments in the chat here. Everybody enjoyed it. A lot of insight, and as always, we really appreciate you joining us. And I can't wait till our next session.
Take care of yourself, everybody, and have a good conference.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
Okay. Cheers then. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Excellent. Excellent. All right. Well, to keep along with our presentation, guys, we're going to move into our next session, which is a practical discussion with our good friend, Jim Love. Jim is the CIO and Chief Content Officer at IT World Canada. He's also an award-winning playwright and musician and continues to publish. So welcome, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me all right on here?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, so we're going to get started up, Eric. I'm just looking for this screen, this button they told me was up. Can you see my screen now? In there?
Yeah, try to share your screen now. Click screen share now, and you should be good to go.
Okay, just click screen share now. Okay, not working. Let me just go back to Zoom if I can find it in here. Okay, so there's where we started it from here. Share screen. I'm going to share my second desktop, which you'll see that. And this should bring up the presentation. So you can see a pond there?
I'm not seeing it right now.
You're not seeing it. Okay.
Yeah. If you go into view options, there should be an option to share the screen there.
I've done that. Yeah, I've shared the screen. I don't know where we go from there.
It could be a bottom of the screen one as well, like a little green.
Yeah, I've done that. I've shared it, the screen, the bottom screen one. Okay. And it says share my desktop too, and I'm sharing that. And let's see now more. Is there anything up here? Annotate, remote control, new share. New share. Okay, well, let's try new share. Does that work? Is that working now?
No, I'm still not seeing it.
New share. Share.
Oh, actually, I think, yep, now we've got it. There we go. Okay. All good.
All right. So here we go. So let's start out. We're going to start out, Eric. After this delay, we will start out with a little quiz here. And I think we got a poll that we're going to come up here in there. It comes around this term. So do you got the poll? Do you got the poll? I'm an English major, actually. Do you have the poll, sir, in there?
Yeah, I think we might be able to grab that. Absolutely. Okay.
So the poll is simple. It starts with this idea of a pond being covered by a lily pad, and this is the answer I'm going to ask for you. And a pond, and then the number of lily pads doubles each day. It takes 48 days to cover this lake. When are you half covered? Okay. And we'll come back when you get the answer for that. We'll come back. But in the meantime, I'm just going to introduce myself. It's a great picture of me in there. But I'm Jim Love. I'm a fellow of a consulting management association here in Canada. I'm CIO and Chief Content Officer. As you pointed out, I'm a writer and musician in there. Or as somebody said, can't you hold a job? No, I do a lot of things. I'm interested in a lot of things. And one of the things I've done is in the past little while is I wrote a book called Digital Transformation in the First Person. And the reason I called it Digital Transformation in the First Person was because it was about the digital transformation I made of a company that I became, as I said, an accidental entrepreneur. I ended up buying half this company. Don't ask me why I bought a publisher. There's an old joke in publishing that if you want to get $1 million, what do you do with it? Well, you keep publishing till it's gone. And it not the best investment choice in the world, but a fun one in the long run. Do we have the answer to the poll yet in there, Eric? Any chance?
Let's see here. I see lots of answers still coming in here.
Okay, let them come in. We'll just get a look at see what we come up in there.
All right.
And so what I'm going to do, because I want to keep this interactive, and I'm going to try and finish as fast as I can, but not fast as I can, but I'm trying to finish on time because I want to make sure that you get time for questions. But I'm going to, and this will be your judgment, Eric, but the best question I get, and I'll answer all the questions after this. If we miss the time, just put the questions in there. I'll answer them all. But Eric, you're going to award a prize of the book. We'll ship it to the best question in there. How's
Nice.
that?
Very good. Very good.
So let's talk about this thing that I'm here to talk about, and I called it data-driven, building a data-driven organization. And it starts with this, or my best slide is, how do you build a data-driven company and not go broke doing it? Because it's really fun to talk about, Amazon does this and Google does this, but the average company owner, somebody who's running a company, wants to know, how can I do this without going broke? And I got to back up a little bit to where the book came in, and this is I called it in the first person because this is real life. This is not a theory. I'm not a theoretician. This is not a passionate thing. I'm a CIO. I don't have passion. But I looked at this thing and I said, things are crumbling around us. Imagine your own disruption. You've invested in this business. You're just about to lose it all. And why? Because you can see it in the data. And here's the data. The decline in readership that happened, if you'll notice, I bought into the business about 2011. You'll be able to see 2010 up there. And that giant flushing sound you see is people stop reading print. The New York Times, the LA Times, look at that cascade. This is not a waterfall, folks. This is the data that shows what's happening to print. This is the wonderful time I came into print. But certainly the digital advertising revenue will save us. Well, no, it won't. Because this is in millions of dollars, what was happening to advertising revenue. And you can see it declining. And I split it between online and print. And you'll see that although there's more online advertising, it's growing small at a much smaller rate, or for a slower rate. Why? Well, because digital advertising is now a commodity in there. And if you've ever seen a movie about newspapers, somebody yells, "Stop the presses." That's exactly what we did. We stopped printing. Now, this sounds really great. And you say, yeah, of course. And it's our hindsight bias. It really sounds like a really good idea. Nobody else in the world had done this in a major publication yet. We had to go into our current owner and announce that we were going to lose something like $3 million in revenue from ads. Now, you pick that up as part of your job. I'm still working for this company. And I got to go in with the then president and say, the only solution, because the numbers tell us, the numbers don't lie. The data does not lie. And the owner's sitting there going, well, we're going to part with $3 million in revenue to save the company? This is when it gets real. And that's when we actually ended up buying the company at that point, because we believed in it. We wrote the book about it. You can read it in the book. But we had achieved a transformation. We weren't just a publisher. We were not just we were a digital platform. We were a digital platform that would work to inform, engage, and connect with our readers. And everybody says it, your real asset is your database and your knowledge. Yeah, our asset was our database. We had no other assets. Our database, our knowledge, and the insights that it represents. And we could afford to do nothing short of, in that competitive world, give an incredible customer experience. None of this. A friend of mine wrote a book called "The Customer Is Bothering Me," and that's what it feels like in many businesses. But you can't do that in the digital world. And why not? Well, if you study, and I'll go, this is I was a professor for a short period of time, so you'll have to get my professor lesson on Porter. If you studied business, you studied Porter, and he's a genius. And he said, hey, this is what competition's good. Industry rivalry's good. That's at the center of this. And there are 4 other forces you need to bargain with. Bargaining power of your suppliers, the bargaining power of your customers, the threat of substitutes, the threat of new entrants in there. And that's what you have to balance. Except in the digital world, that doesn't work. In the digital world, the customer has the bargaining power. The forces, Luke, the force is not in balance. You're in hyper competition, and the bargaining power of your customers will not go away. And the digital customer is unique. They are empowered, they are demanding, they are impatient, and they're invisible. Invisible. Why? Well, you don't see them. They are a ping on your site. Who is this person? They ping your site. 57% of purchase decisions are made before the customer even talks to the supplier. So we now have what we'll call a new chapter in our piece. We were digitally transformed. We had to become data driven. And that meant, and again, everybody tosses this stuff up like this is in real time. Digital processes have to happen. You have to not talk about agile, you have to become agile. You have to be adaptive, because those signals, those digital signals you're getting, you have to move as fast as they do in there. And you have to leverage the data for competitive advantage. All sounds nice. How do you do it? How do you, we started, and it's not just automation. We took our subscriber database and we put that automated. Big deal. I've been doing that all my life. But what does it mean to be data driven? And this is what I come up with, which was the idea that the only value from data analytics, this is in my opinion, comes from how we leverage the information, not just the information, but the insight that we get to transform our business. The only value from data analytics is when we use that information and insight to transform our business in there. And I called it the new KPIs. And that's in the new book. This is, every author's got to have a conceit. This is mine. The new KPIs are knowledge that predicts or influences. And anything else is not playing well. And don't forget the world we're in. If you come to my website, you've got to, first we have to win the Google search war. So we've got to get you there. The next thing, in about 3 seconds, you're going to look at that list of Google articles and you're going to pick mine or not. And then when you get to the page, you are going to read it or go. That's the immediacy in there. And that's what we're doing. And so what if we could, in that short period of time, truly understand the customer's needs from their behavior? What if we could assess this in real time? What if we could build not just automation, but efficiency into our organization? And what if we could create a recommendation engine to keep them there longer, show them new stuff in there? What if we could anticipate their needs? What if we could make this a personalized offering in there? And then can we do that at web speed? And my staff said, you're nuts. But it's not nuts. That's what it means to be a data-driven company. The experience, the handshake, the encounter with the customer in that brief seconds has to do a lot of things. So what keeps you from doing this? This is what keeps you from moving forward in there? What keeps companies from doing this? And I'll give you a hint. It's not money. It's not just money in there. And we're gonna do it. We're gonna do another poll. So Eric, did we get a consensus from the last poll?
We did. So I'll give you the top three here. So
yep.
We had 50% say 47, 21.4% at 24, and 14.3 at 18.
Okay, the ones who answered 47 are not only right. When you think about it, your hindsight bias will say, hey, that is right. It doubles the last day. It doubles every day. So the 47th day. So those of you got 47, good for you in there. And the rest of you, don't worry about it. But it's the example of how our minds work. We answer a question, and we'll talk about this. We answer a question we think we want to answer in there. So here's the first thing. It's not just money. And we're going to do another poll in here because I want to see whether you can get this. Any idea how much companies spend in doing this? So let's take a second. We'll get it, and we'll just take the early answers on this because I'll give you the answer. Any idea how much companies spend on data analytics and data? And I'll go back over this and I'll give you a history of it. It's a high number. When I first started out in this industry, we were doing data warehouses. It would take us 6 to 8 weeks to formulate one question. because we'd go to the data scientists, we'd put together the algorithms, you put together what was called a cube in those days. You would make sure that you cleansed and it did all your ETL routines, brought them all in and all that sort of stuff. And it ended up with a fair whack of work just to do one question. Things got a little faster as we go through, but it's still, and there's software, hardware, all of these things. The cloud is not free. It may be cheaper, but it's not free in there. So what do you think? Do we get any answers, Eric, in there? How are we doing?
Looking into that right now.
Okay.
I think we're still tabulating, Jim.
Okay. Well, we'll do it. If you answered already, can't answer now because I'm going to show you the answer. But we'll check and see how accurate you are in there. By 2022, the statistic estimates we're going to be spending $274 billion on data and data analytics. Billion with a B in there. And as one senator in the US once said, $1 billion here, $1 billion there. Soon you're talking about real money, right? So $274 billion. So we must be like super duper. We just, how good are we doing at this? Well, the number of companies that call themselves data-driven decreased in that period. Decreased in that period. It declined from 37.1% to 31% in one survey. In the Harvard Business Review survey said 72% of survey participants reported that they have yet to forge a data-driven culture. 69% reported they have not created a data-driven organization. 53% state that they're not treating data as a business asset. And 52% admitted they aren't competing on data and analytics. That's what you get for $274 billion. It's not the money. The money is an excuse. And that's what we had to figure out being a small company, that you had to find a better way of doing this. Or you have to start answering questions directly. And so I don't ask questions like, what's our barrier that's coming up? I tend to talk directly to my staff and to the people who work with me. I say, we know it's the right thing to do. Why do we suck at it? And and that's, if you're going to be data driven is looking in a mirror. And when I say these things, sometimes people get upset on my staff and things like that. They get used to it after a while, because you don't progress by looking at the stuff you do and patting yourself in the back. You progress because you look at it and you say, how can we be better? And so we ask questions like that are blunt and abrupt. So what? Who cares? How do we do this? And that's one of the first things to do in getting to a data-driven culture. You don't have to be as abrupt as me, but you do have to call things as they are. Forget the fancy terms. Forget that. Fix yourself on data and what data tells you. And data speaks directly. And even then, we talk about the reasons for this failure. And these are, I pulled these, I've been through 7 or 8, 10 studies and all that sort of stuff. And you get, and I've been doing this for quite a while. So you start to pick up on what people are saying about what the reasons for this fail. Architecture, management lacks vision. We don't have the right use cases calculated. There's no analysis strategy. There's too few analysis professionals. We only had more people. We only spent more money. Data cleansing, and you can sit around and moan about data cleansing for hours and weeks in there, because data is never clean, and you never have enough, or you have too much in there. The financial gain, what's the business case? It's unknown in there. Ethical, social, and legal issues, fair enough to think about, but handling data has its own issues in there. And data analytics isn't part of the core business. It's not embedded in there, the culture in there. We haven't aligned the company culture. Those are the 10 common reasons, and I think you'll find them in there. And I don't mean to dismiss them, but sometimes we spend our time, as one client said to me one time, admiring the problem. So what are you going to do about it? And I broke it down into 3 areas. And there are 3 things that, if you look at this, and yes, I'm not trying to trivialize this, but if you look at 3 things that you focus on and you focus on these areas, I think you can make great progress. Will you get everything? I don't know. But is the 80-20 rule here or the 90-10 rule? Probably. And this has been, the three things that you could practically address. And the big question I always get is, who leads this? Is it management? Is it the executive? Can I help lead it? Everybody can contribute at this. I'll leave it at that. So anybody who understands these can help their organization move faster, better towards being a data-driven organization. People. Number one thing in there, people. And we saw it in there. Data analytics, not part of the core business, is not part of the culture in there. Why? Why doesn't it work this way? Well, we're not carbon-based computers. And that's the first thing to get that we have to get through our minds, is that data, Aristotle said the understanding moves nothing in there. People have known for millennia that the brain of people, we are emotional creatures, we are not logical creatures. And how can I prove that to you? Well, at least probably half of you thought that responded with a simple answer to a question that says our brains don't think first mathematically. Here's a classic one. All roses are flowers. Some flowers fade quickly, and therefore some roses fade quickly. If you give that to my class at Waterloo where I taught, inevitably people would argue with me when I told them that's not true. What? Why? Well, because all roses are flowers, correct. Some flowers fade quickly, yes. But some flowers doesn't have to include the set of roses. A mind that thinks in data will solve that problem correctly. But our minds don't work like that. And that's okay. That's not a problem. Our senses don't tell us the truth. Which one man is taller? A, B, or C? No matter what you say, your mind is telling you C is bigger, but it's not. C is exact. These are cut and paste. I've almost had fist fights about this one in my class, because those two lines, A and B, are not the same length. Are not the same length in your eyes, but they are the same length. And I even took to putting that blue bar on my slide so I could regress from the slide presentation and overlay it on those two, because I've had people say that's a trick. They're not the same length. And Kirsten called the Muller-Lyer test. But the fact is, our senses don't do this. Why not? And how can you build a data-driven organization when we're hardwired to not be data-driven? And that's just the fact. And like I said, this buddy of mine here is Aristotle at 2,300 years ago, and he came up with this idea that and all of this stuff. If you've ever written an essay, you've used Aristotle. You're a genius in Greek culture, because you've had somebody said to you, all of the things in your essay have to be relevant, sufficient, but they also have to be acceptable. And that's where the human mind fails, because we don't think statistically or logically. We use heuristics. We use rules that we've learned, and our experience always trumps the data. And if you just want a great, a great example of that, would you rather have a hamburger that is 80% lean beef? Would you like that one? Unless you're vegetarians out there, sorry, and I'm a vegetarian, so I'm using the wrong. Or would you like a hamburger that's 20% fat? Which one would you like? 20% fat or 80% lean beef? Except they're the same thing. And if you admit to yourself you wanted the one that was 80% lean beef, it's exactly the same. Our minds don't work like that. Matter of fact, there's a whole list of biases, and this is the 40-minute lecture, so I can't give you them all. But these are all things that you have, from confirmation to status quo, fear of loss. We have so many biases written into our brains because of the way they work. And a wonderful man, Daniel Kahneman, and I highly recommend the book, said it simplified this, didn't simplify. There's a great deal of data behind what he does, but he says you can think of it, and not that we have two brains. We don't have two brains. We have two systems, system one and system two. And system one is the one that 2 + 2, you answered 4 before you even thought. That it drives for you, it moves you forward. And it's evolved over time when it learned when things rustle in the bushes, run. in there. That's system one. And that's a mind that has been built for millennia. And it handles all kinds of problem solving. But when it has a difficult problem, it substitutes an easier problem. When it sees the pond problem, it says what you really want is half of 48. And you don't even notice it happening. And it doesn't respect or basic statistical rules at all. It can't, it opts for the 80% lean beef. It just doesn't know how to do that. But it also mistakes the ease of solving a problem with certainty. So the faster you can solve that problem, the more certain you are. And sometimes the more wrong you are, the more certain you are, which is why that, 80% of people think they're above average drivers. And if you do some basic math, you will find out why that's wrong. And it'll find a cause and effect relationship where none exists. And when you confront it, it'll rationalize it. It also is self-centered and has an uncharitable view. It's why, it's based on the fact that what we experience and what we remember are different. If you've ever had a great meal in a restaurant, just a wonderful time, the night was going great, and then if you're in one of the restaurants in Toronto near us, and probably like what happens at the end of the night? The guy disappears and the waiter disappears, and then you can't get that cup of coffee, and then the owner's over there and you're waving at him saying, come on, can we just get a cup of coffee? We need to get to the theater or wherever we're going. Remember when we went to the theater? And they give you that dull cup of coffee, and the last 5 minutes and you have the coffee, it sucks. You walk out of there, and what do you say? We're never going back. Terrible experience. No, it wasn't a terrible experience. 55 minutes of that hour were a great experience. 5 minutes were a bad experience, and that will color everything. We live in our memories. Now that's okay when you're picking restaurants, but when you're going through data, that's dangerous. So we're not sophisticated carbon-based computers. Processes, that's our second piece in there that we have to conquer. Processes, doing it by the book in there. And no matter how much you talk about organizations being flat, there are hierarchies in organizations, in most organizations to this day. And if you pulled off a perfectly flat organization, good for you. I haven't done it yet. And there's just lots of reasons why not. And here's one I took off the internet. This is a standard chart in there. So now let's talk about communication and how processes work. Processes are owned at the bottom of this by the people that are way down in the hierarchy. And so if something goes wrong in this one, it's got to find its chain all the way up to the top, where somebody else will then, the person at the top will go down and talk to the person in that other place way across the organization. And then that person will probably have to talk to somebody else and come back with some other things in there and change their processes to solve this problem. That will have to be approved by senior management. And that will have to cascade its way down where you put a new procedure in place, because that's how you run a company, by processes. If you're going to do it by processes and procedures. Guess what? I told you my situation, I got 3 to 5 seconds to make that contact with the reader and get them there. And if you're in e-commerce, you have seconds. You do not have weeks and months to detect problems and start to work there. So our idea of managing a company logically by processes is not going to work. You need to manage not by processes, you need to manage by algorithms. And by the way, algorithms are better at managing than people. And that's just a fact, because this is what that structure does to you. And it. I have to check back up here and all this sort of, and by that time, you just want out of this thing, and you're going to give it a bad rating. And that's what a truly digital company has to fight against. Nobody reads the manuals. There isn't enough time to do this. An algorithm will always outperform an expert. And you can take that on faith or send me a note and I'll tell you why I can prove that to you in there. But if they're going to be guided, let the people be, if they must make a decision, let them make it by culture. Let them equip them to make the right decision. Equip their system one mind to say, check with system two. And when they need to choose, give them the data to make a wise investment choice. And that wise investment choice is always in favor of the lifetime value of the customer. That's 2. items that you have to change to become a data-driven company. And third, and the one that we're going to spend a lot of time on these, is technology. And technology is, you're all here. What our employees or customers are used to at home. We've all got phones. We've got all this sort of stuff. We're great. And this may be an old joke for some of you, but the Flintstones were an old cartoon about bedrock and cave people and stuff like that. And that's what we feel like when we encounter our legacy systems. We're in the space age and the digital age with our home devices, and we're in the Stone Age with our company devices. And but the question is, what does that do to us? We're going to give you another poll. How much money do we spend just running our legacy systems in there? How much do we spend just running our legacy systems? Can we just pop that poll up there? And again, we'll get the answers coming in on there, and then I'm going to come back in and talk about some of what happens in there. So that's how much time do we spend with our legacy systems? Those legacy systems are important. They're significantly important to us. I'll go back past the end, because they have hidden consequences. They give us that poor customer experience. They give the negative employee experience. Who wants to work for a company that has crappy technology, especially younger people? You have no mobile in a lot of companies in there. You have inefficient processes, and who can talk about algorithms when our processes aren't automated? And you can't scale. And you have security issues and risks in this. And a lot of what you see above, it's like an iceberg. A lot of what's really dragging you down is below the surface. It's security issues and risks and the inability to integrate. Those are all huge things. And I don't know if we got your answers in yet.
Yeah, we've got them in here. And it's interesting, interesting to see this poll, Jim. So for 0 to 50%, we have 23.1,
yep.
50 to 60, 7.7, 60 to 70, 46.2. And here's the interesting part: 70 to 80, 0%.
Yeah.
And that's the real more range. Than 80, 23.1.
Yeah, the real range is between 60 and 80%, probably between 70 and 80. We do a survey called the Canadian CIO Census, and I picked as low as 60 as an average in there. It's in the 60s, and others, most other surveys come up to 70 to 80%. And that's all the money spent just keeping the lights on. So how do you deal with that? And I'm going to start with a little bit of a prescriptive piece in here, because this is something that in my mind, why the low code, no code is one of the things that will help us through this endeavor. Because, and I've been talking about this for 25 years, you need to isolate the legacy. How do you get off a dead horse? You get off the dead horse. You don't try and drag it across the finish line. In there, stop investing in the legacy, seal it up, do no harm, if in the medical terms. Start investing every dime you've got in the new. But you also have to start building a central data store. And the central data store is important because it's the central source of truth. And if we're going to have a data-driven company, we have to have a central source of truth. So you have to start building that data store in there. And that means communicating with using APIs and using and things like that can help you communicate with your old, but not reinvesting in the old. And shrink the legacy over time. And this is exactly what we did. And this is what a small business can do. What relatively mid-sized, like we're millions of dollars, but we're not Google. Let me tell you that. But we shrunk our legacy. And you do that over time. How do you do it? The same way you lose weight, not by doing a crash diet. You do it by doing it bit by bit by bit. I was telling my folks that no big one decision kills you. Just 1 million paper cuts kill you. So kill your legacy with 1 million paper cuts. You need an investment architecture. And I've coined this phrase DUH for cloud and mobile, because it's like if you're not investing in cloud and mobile, ignore everything I've said, because I'm sorry, I can't help you. But that's the architecture, and in there. And I think even everybody's sort of got that. But open. We did a lot of stuff with open source, but I'm much more interested in open standards, because when you have open standards, you never have a legacy again. because and that's what I used to say to people. They'd say, how do I judge a SaaS provider? I said, ask them how you can get out. Ask your SaaS provider how you get out of this arrangement. If they can't answer that, you don't want them. Why? Because you don't want to be locked into anybody. And so open standards keep you from being locked in. And then you build modular integrated frameworks, open APIs, responsive mobile frameworks, and you have your data assets as a central source of truth. And that to me is the promise of low and no code, is being able to do those things across your organization. And that's how you can build a data-driven company, by addressing those two things and not go broke. Now I'm going to just recap that. The only value from data analytics comes from how we leverage the information and the insight to transform our businesses. Not I'm not talking about incremental. If you're in the incremental game, God bless you. I wish you the best. I don't see how you can survive in a hyper-competitive world. You have to transform your businesses, but you need to leverage, and that's the value of data and the value of data analytics. Don't admire the problem. This was built by people. It can be dealt with by people. And so no matter where you are in your organization, you need to help move that forward in there. And just because somebody else hasn't done their job, that doesn't mean you don't do yours. And so here's what my 10 steps for doing this. You take stock and you take steps. Look at where you are and where you want to go to, and focus on outcomes. You'd be surprised at how much Oscar Wilde said one time, a fool knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. And a fool knows how much you spend, not how much you get from that spending. And we have to start talking about outcomes, customer satisfaction, excellent experiences, and how much are we willing to invest in that? And that's the path to business and customer outcomes. There's a longer workshop I do on that because it's not as obvious as it seems. Measure everything. And if you can't measure it, learn to measure it. There's a great book by Doug Hubbard called I think it's called You Can Measure Anything in Business or something like that. Look for Doug Hubbard. He's one of the brilliant guys in this area. And he said, measure everything. Start taking stock of that. Isolate your legacy systems. Stop the bleeding in there. And we talked about that earlier. Create that single source of truth and make it visible. And I did this, so we always had one source of data. That means amalgamating your spreadsheets and all that stuff into one place and building that central source of truth where everybody at least has the same number to start with. And then demonstrate the discipline of data. Change the conversation. And this is where you can, no matter where you are in an organization, you can have an impact by refusing to succumb to your system one mind, by looking at stuff and challenging people and saying, why? Why do you say that? What data supports what you're saying? And that's the conversation we built. And we've come a long way in that. And I will not, everybody knows now, I'm the Bloomberg of meetings. And Michael Bloomberg's famous for saying, in God we trust, everybody else brings data. And people know it. After a while, when you start insisting on data, people will come at, and they'll start talking to you that way. And they'll start being proud of it. Test relentlessly. Test everything relentlessly. Test your own ideas first, and then and in front of everybody. And don't be afraid of them being wrong. That's learning. But above all, create small victories, pilots and measures against the baseline. And once you've measured something, and the trick is you have to measure against the baseline. That's why I said the early piece was measure. Measure now. Get everybody to accept the measurement of the way you are, and then show them from a small victory how we moved that forward. And that's important. Measure first, do second, show the small victories, and then tell that story. Tell that story everywhere. You'd be amazed at how little stories start to define a culture and change a culture. Did you see what happened when we did this? Did you see what happened when we did this? I came up with one statistic from our readers. I said, hey, you know something? Our readers like to read this, this, and this. And I actually went back and showed the differences for our writers in what our readers read based on some analytics we did. And it was different than what the writers thought. And I got resistance at first, but now I can start, when I start to see some of the things where we knock it out of the park because we've done some of those things, I tell the story. I send an email. I tell everybody. Find allies. This is not a single person's game. This is, you build coalitions of success if you want to do any change in a company. And you realize even if you're the owner, you need coalitions of success. Find allies. And then rinse and repeat. Measure on and demonstrate that, celebrate it, and keep doing it. And that's the secret to building a data-driven organization in there. And what do you get from it? Oh man, if we could do this in that 5 seconds, understand a customer's needs. And that's I will settle for nothing less than that. When the customer gets in there, I'm going to present the right thing to them in there. Am I there yet? No. Am I going to keep working? Small victories. I'm going to keep working at it. I'm going to be able to assess my risks in real time in a business. What a great thing to be able to do. You know, build not just automation, but efficiencies into our operations. Talk about productivity and efficiency in there. Whether it's our programmers, and I said this yesterday, no programmer wants to spend their day pulling bugs out of code. Give them give them tools where they can actually reuse modules. Give them things where they can do that, and they'll unleash their creativity. Create that recommendation engine. Anticipate the needs of people, personalize, speak directly to that client, personalize to them, and operate at web speed. And those are the outcomes we seek in search of exceptional customer experience. So just to wrap up here in there, the pandemic proved we are no longer limited by technology. And and you may say that the low code, no code is not everywhere yet, or analytics are not everywhere, and AI is not everywhere. Stop admiring the problem. We are no longer limited by technology. We are limited by the combination of our determination and our imagination. Our determination and our imagination. I'll start with the question people asked when they started. Who leads this? Everybody. Because leadership is not a position. Leadership is what you get when you earn it. If you're walking out in front of a group of people and you look back and there's nobody there all of a sudden, you're just out for a walk. People have to follow you and they have to want to follow you. And leadership is demonstrated by admitting failure without accepting defeat. And that's my message for you. So if you want to lead, earn leadership. And if you have to choose one, choose to lead. That's how you get there. That's, as they say, is the end of the formal presentation. If we've got a couple minutes for questions, I'd be pleased to take them and pleased to follow up anytime after that. I hope that was helpful. Again, this is not theory. This is what I live every day. And you can challenge me on whether or not I achieve it.
Yeah. Great presentation, Jim. I mean, and what's interesting to me about it is, this is 2 keynote speeches that we've had in a row to focus on outcomes, right? And I think that is a good message to convey to the audience. Unfortunately, we are out of time, Jim, but I do have an interesting question that was in there that I will make sure that I forward, because I know that at the beginning of this, you promised a book as a prize. So we will make sure that we make that connection. We'll send that to you, and we'll fulfill. But again, we would like to thank you for joining us. As always, just tremendous insight. And I think that based on all of the questions, I think we should take a screenshot of this and send them to you so you can see some of the comments and questions that were coming in. But
love to, and be pleased to answer them for people, and you can make that available some other time in there. So.
Phenomenal. All right, Jim, thanks again.
Thank you.
All right. So that takes us to our next session, and we have a panel of individuals that will be joining. So today I'd like to welcome some of our esteemed colleagues from our partner channels. Today we'll be joined by Alan Joen, Account Director at Collier & Pickard. We'll be joined by Brian Sagers, President and Senior Consultant at Teco Systems, And again, my friend Tolga Artan, chairman at Lucky Eye, joining us from Istanbul. How are you?
Thank you.
All right. Gentlemen, how are you? Good to see you again, Alan, Brian. This is the first time I've seen you on the Low Code Marathon, so welcome.
Thank you. I've been enjoying it every morning.
Excellent, excellent, good. Well, hopefully you're taking in some of the insights here. Excellent. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining. You see the topic of our discussion on the screen here today. So, just to let the audience know that we're going to be discussing how to embrace low-code, no-code technology to drive innovation in today's world. So, obviously, we at Creatio are firm believers in this, but that's why we've brought some great minds together so we can discuss that and have a good roundtable on how we feel that low code is going to help to drive that innovation. So to get things started, guys, I have a list of topics here that we would like to kind of cover off, and the first one I'll direct towards Alan, because I think this touched on his presentation a little bit yesterday. So Alan, if we're looking at innovation, what are the main drivers of innovations, and what are the challenges that are surrounding innovations? And then guys, feel free to chime in as we go along here as well.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks, Eric. I think the first thing I have to say is that those are two really big questions, and the answers might take up the whole of this session. So I'll try not to do that. The drivers, as I see it, the drivers to innovation are survival. Really, it's the continuing success of an organization, and for lots of organizations, that drive for innovation will be the ever-improving customer experience that they can deliver. So if an organization can continually innovate, continually improve the way the customer experience is delivered, that will give them the competitive advantage that attracted customers to them in the first place, allow them to improve customer loyalty, reduce churn, improve customer retention, but perhaps equally importantly, innovation can drive employee loyalty. And in today's marketplace, and this is something that we touched on yesterday, Eric, in today's marketplace, talent is short in many areas of employment for many businesses. And trying to find people with the right skills is not easy. And in some areas of IT and data science, which are very important skills to have in organizations these days, those people can be very expensive. So if you can innovate in such a way that the business is always exciting, it's got vibrancy, then employee loyalty is improved, and you remove some of that churn. Another thing that results from improving the customer experience, improving customer loyalty, retention, and improving employee retention is that it improves the impact. You get a positive impact for the stakeholders in the business. And by stakeholders, I mean the whole spectrum of not just investors, but everybody that in some way has a connection with the business. If the business is doing well, if it's continually innovating, improving its standing in the market, then the whole supply chain into that business gets a positive advantage out of it. Often businesses these days are trying to have a social impact in some way with green policies, with corporate social responsibility, and companies that innovate and stay vibrant contribute better into those social environments. So I think the drivers for innovation are diverse, and what innovation looks like from one organization to another will vary widely. But I think if you focus on improving the customer experience, everything else kind of ripples out from that. Now, the second part of your question was what are the challenges to that, and inevitably it will be the climate that you create in your organization to allow innovation to emerge. The boardroom does not have an exclusive hold on innovation. Innovation can come from any part of your organization. It might even come from outside your organization, where your customers or suppliers spot things that you could be doing better, more effectively, and because they care about the relationship they have with you, then they share these things with you, and you can innovate based on that external input. So I think time and awareness are important. You have to give people the time. We have a full-time marketing executive at Collier Pickard who's only charged with doing his job as a marketing operative for 80% of his time, 4 days a week. He's given free rein to spend 20% of his time just exploring the internet, looking at research, thinking about new ways of using social media, thinking about ways of improving our customer experience as a CRM company. And the company allows him the latitude of using that time to just roam and think and discuss with colleagues. And that's what I would call an innovative culture. It's one that's done us well. And I think if you combine together this driver of improving customer experience and try to take the challenge of having a innovative culture head on by giving people the time and the latitude to go out and think and be free range, then you can create a culture that will lead to your continued success as an organization.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. So, Brian, I know that you have a lot of these types of conversations surrounding innovations. What are you seeing from your customers as challenges? What are their top challenges?
We do, and thank you for giving me the easier of the two questions, because I think the challenges are typically, this is an old term, maybe I'm aging myself, but people don't like their cheese moved. People like things the way they are, and innovation almost always is change. Really, it is always change, and usually it's change. If it's good innovation, is going to be semi-drastic change. It's going to be, we know these are the 20 steps that we used to do it, but if we do this one thing different, we can make it 2 steps, but it's going to be drastically different, and it's going to be less people-driven, which sometimes that is frightening. So you get a lot of pushback from people that go, I've done this for 30 years this way, it works, I'm not doing anything different. Or I'm afraid that it's changing my job and I'm not going to be necessary anymore. And so getting people into that, seeing some success, and to Alan's point, giving them some freedom. Typically most customers we run into, everybody's doing more than a full-time job, at least it feels like, or they believe they are. And to ask them to take 5%, 10% of their day, even to work just on rolling out a new project, becomes a challenge. So I think those two things, I think people seeing change is scary. I think that's always a little frightening. And then also people getting enough leeway from executive or from leadership to be allowed to figure out what's the best new process. We, as part of what we do, is guide in that, but sometimes it's, a lot of times, we just had this conversation, Scott and I, the other day. Somebody says, "Oh, tell me what you did with 3 other companies just like us, because that's what we want to do," and that's very rarely accurate or feasible. It's like, what you do is different, unless you're running a McDonald's or something like that. What you do is different than what your competitor does, even if they're very similar. So it's always driving, what are you trying to accomplish? How do we want to get there? And then let us show you or talk to you about some of the best ways we've seen it done many other places. That's a great way to innovate. But that's what I see as one of the bigger challenges, or the 2 biggest challenges we run into: fear of change and time or leeway to actually make that kind of change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great couple of points, Brian. And I want to get Tolga's opinion on this as well, but I'd also like to bring the audience into this a little bit. Let's run a poll and ask the question: what are the main challenges surrounding innovations in your company? So while the audience are responding to that, Tolga, I know you've got an opinion on this as well. So. What do you feel, are challenges, but, maybe also what are drivers that you're seeing out there?
I think innovation requires a change, and Alan and Brian also mentioned it very in a good way. What I experience here in Turkey, in most of the cases, are the environment where innovation is required is also very important, even in the organization and around the organization. The people who are given tasks to innovate something, a process or a product or a platform or an idea, it depends on the environment that they are working on and living in. This is also about the organization, the type of the organization that they are working. In some cases, we are facing some expectation based on the time limits of the working hours, depending on limiting their times, depending on when to innovate or how to innovate in some companies in our country. And this is becoming some kind of not good for the new generations who are very open to change and very open to innovate something in their field. This is how we face in our country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm thinking that the audience is agreeing surrounding this as well. So I get the results of this poll back, and it's interesting to see. 45.5% said they're missing an innovation strategy. 36.4% said there's lack of collaboration. And in third place, we have missed customer connection, right? So, to your point earlier, guys, not being able to have those customers identify, right, for you, right? We don't have that connection telling us what we can do better and understanding that. So, Alan, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that one. So, when we look at innovation and we look at the challenges, the drivers, I would as the biggest innovation trends that we're seeing in 2021, right? Obviously 2020 we had to innovate quite rapidly, but what are we seeing coming into to 2021? We can start with Brian on this one.
I think to Tolga's to a point, I think younger workforce, with that workforce coming in, they are much more flexible. Opposite to my point earlier, what we see sometimes with the people that don't like change, they almost expect change. So I think we're seeing more of that. I think also because there's kind of this big, everybody taking a little bit of a breath. I think we're seeing some rapid growth in business and maybe some projects that have been on hold. And I think this is a common thing that's just happened year over year with technology growth. And change every year seems like it doubles. I think we're still seeing that with AI getting a little stronger, connectivity growing every day, right? Everything's connectivity, high speed access almost everywhere, at least in main areas, and growing out even in the outskirts of areas. I think you're starting to see those types of things proliferate even faster than they had before, and I think they're just going to keep going that way.
Mm-hmm. Great points, Alan. What do you think? What are you seeing as the biggest trends?
I think that Brian's point is right. I think that people across the organisation are having more influence on ways that things could improve. So, like I said in my answer to your first question, the boardroom doesn't have a monopoly on innovation, and I think that's the trend, because you look back into the 20th century, and that might well have been the case. The idea of the suggestion box that would be on the wall in the office that never had any tickets put in it because people were afraid to put their head above the parapet. And that's kind of gone now. I think people are able to speak up. They feel empowered to speak up, and I think that drives change in its own right. The very fact that the people who are dealing with customers, dealing with supply chains, dealing with the day-to-day problems, they're the ones who come up with the solutions, because they're trying to make their own lives more comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's it's a good point. And if we're not in today's world, if we're not innovating, we're going to fall behind. We may die, right? Like, I think we need to drive innovations, throughout our organization. I know in Boston, where I'm from, we have these innovation hubs, right, where local businesses are contributing to these innovation hubs to, maybe it's a selfish purpose. Maybe they're interested in purchasing that technology down the road or acquiring it somehow. But, driving innovations is really, something that a lot of big organizations are focusing on, and fueling that innovation throughout different markets. Tolga, what are you seeing as trends with your customers?
In our environment, I think the request for using data is getting very important, and any process or any new idea based on this data is helping companies to change the way they operate, or they change the way they understand. And after COVID, most of the companies are struggling to understand the experience of the customers, the expectations of the customers, because all the old norms are changed right now. We have to rebuild our strategies in some cases, especially the customer experience and the employee experience part. And during this, there are some accelerators, like the use of AI. In some cases, we are calling AI use cases, and it brings the use of data within this AI approach, and creating some kind of very different solutions for today's problems of understanding. And also, in some cases, we see that the drivers inside these type of use cases helps companies to understand their employee expectations and the use of the processes inside the organization. So there is a mix between these things, I believe. In our organization, we have an AI lab, and there we see that there are some untouched areas where data is not collected and where data is not used. We have a case for that, for using the data inside psychology, for example. We've seen that in today's example, the data is not used in any process. So we are trying to look what is happening inside, for example, and try to understand how we can make any further steps during this process of the psychologists. And lots of points are coming into the minds of our colleagues and the minds of our collaborators in the project. So it's a common understanding of what can be done in this new area, I believe.
Excellent, excellent. And I want to again poll the audience on a couple of different things, because there's been some studies out there. So Bloomberg is doing its annual ranking of the world's 50 most innovative countries. So I'd like to ask the audience, which country do you think was #1 in 2020? And while we're waiting for those results to come in, I think if we were to poll the panel here, we'd have 3 different answers, right? But we'll leave it to the audience, guys. So while we're waiting on the answer for that, another question that I would I would have, so we're talking about innovation trends. And what I would think is, how do you feel that, low code and no code technology can help drive innovations as well, right? So we know all of the different trends. We see low code, no code as being a way to innovate rapidly. We saw in a previous presentation that, by 2030, low code, no code is going to be a $187 billion industry, right? That's what it's anticipated at. So, would love to hear your opinion on how low code is going to help low code, no code, I should say, drive innovations in. Alan, do you have a thought on that? I'm trying to go round robin. I'm making sure I'm going either clockwise or counterclockwise on the screen here. So.
So, Eric, who did you direct the question to? Sorry.
Oh, yeah, to you, Alan. I was going to address the question to you first.
Okay. So I think low code, no code, it actually becomes an enabler of rapid innovation. Mm-hmm. For all of my working career, over the last 4 decades, IT has been a bottleneck on introducing change. More and more workplace is based on the way that it handles digital information, and if your IT department is a bottleneck, then everything is dictated by the pace with which they can manage projects which are thrown at them, and the priorities that are set by the senior management. So if low code and no code push the ability to deliver innovation out, take the workload off the IT department and spread it out to the operational units of the business who had the idea to innovate in the first place, and they can run prototyping. You come into some governance questions here about whether the user department that's handling the low code development has total responsibility for the governance of the deployment of this system, or whether they have shared governance with the IT department, or whether the centralized IT people and the CIO and the digital management team, whether they have overall governance. That's something that's going to vary from one company to another. But if you push at least the prototyping and concept to minimum viable product, if you can push at least that much out, then you're going to rapidly decrease the time it takes to get these things out and into function, and therefore reduce the time that it takes to have a positive impact on the customer experience.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's something that, I talk to customers about daily, right? It's that time to value. Innovations, have to be driven by the benefit that they're going to have for the organization. And the quicker that you can recognize those benefits, the more palatable it is for the business or the organization to drive those innovations. So, absolutely. Tolga, what are your thoughts? What do you think is low code can bring to innovation strategies?
I totally agree with Alan about it reduces the time to the market about any type of process or any type of product that you are working on. Besides it, I think it brings freedom to business users because they are the ones who are dealing with the real tasks. They are in front of the customers. They are in charge of the operations. And I'm sure that they are hiding half of their thoughts not to argue with some kind of the other organization departments inside the organization. Right now, they have freedom to try and they have freedom to understand how they can achieve an idea to a prototype. And then they can try with the good results or the bad results, but this is also important to get some results behind any idea. I think this is also important for innovation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Brian, you're back. I saw you dip out there for a second.
Yeah,
I was worried.
I think the time at which it can be done, I think is the key, because the rate things are going right now, if you had to wait, some of the reason innovation is hard in a non-low code, no code environment is if you had to wait to go through a normal development process for, say, an advanced routing algorithm or something for your company, by the time you get it done, there's a very high risk that it is no longer innovative. So the ability to try things, I think, also almost sprouts innovation on its own, because we can do something. Customers work with us a lot where we used to do something, they'd call and say, okay, I'd like to try this, and it'd be a month, right? And a large project. And now it's like, let me give this over to a guy and you can take a look at this early next week. And it'll take a couple of hours type thing. Or if they're doing it on their own, if they've got somebody that's got some business analyst skills or some design skills, they can try things without it being a burden on their time and their costs. Like we talked about it before, nobody has a ton of time. Everybody's already busy. So with low code, no code allows me to quickly try something. I can quickly either vet that that's interesting and works and maybe talk to some other people about it, or no, I've now seen it doesn't work. So I think the ability to rapidly prototype and try things, or just be successful for something that's going to work, that's the simpler of the two, is the quicker ROI, much easier. But the one of the more interesting things is we can more quickly try something, and that might spread out into something else that spreads out into something else that's very innovative, but took us a third of the time of a standard development cycle. So I think that's the biggest thing I see.
Excellent, excellent. So I have an update on our poll. So the polling question was, which country do you think is the most innovative in 2020? So we had a very close tie between Germany and the USA. But the correct answer, that is according to Bloomberg, is Germany. So Germany throughout 2020 was the most innovative country that was polled. So a lot of, and that's not atypical. A lot of German innovation has been prevalent throughout the years. So I'm not surprised. But I did not see USA on top like I thought Brian was going to say. And Tolga had Turkey, I'm sure. And Alan, we know where you stand. Excellent. So, guys, this has been a great discussion on that. Now, I'd like to possibly take a few questions from the audience and see if we can answer some of their thoughts as well. So, a couple of things that came in that I found interesting here is we have one comment that came in. It says COVID-19 became the main driver of innovation in my company. How do I encourage innovation in my organization beyond that now? Once we get past COVID-19, how do we keep that innovation spirit going? Anyone want to jump in, or there we go. Alan will take this one.
Okay. So a couple of years back, I had the pleasure of listening to Dr. Kellyanne Schmidt, who's a lecturer in applied psychology at Manchester Metropolitan University. And she was talking about the psychology of behavior change. And I think the answer to the question that's asked is, how do I encourage innovation on top of the innovation that came out of COVID? Mm-hmm. The answer to that is that you create a behavior change in people so that they're always looking for innovative opportunities. And to create that culture where you encourage people to change their behavior and think this way all the time, Dr. Schmidt was saying that the only way that behavior change will happen is if people are motivated to change their behavior in that direction. And as an organization, to motivate people, you have to give them two things. You have to give them capability and you have to give them opportunity. And by that, she meant that in capability terms, you have to give them the tools to be able to make a change. So in this case, where we're talking about low code, it fits perfectly. If people have got the ability to experiment with low code, no code systems, try things out, see if they make sense, take them to MVP, and then engage people to look at how they scale with good governance to the whole organization. If you could give people the capability with a low code system and access to the right data, that's half the story of creating the motivation for people to work this way. The second half was opportunity. And that links straight back to time, the point I made about the marketing executive at Collier Pickard. He's actually officially given 20% of his time to roam and think and explore. And if you can give people time, maybe not 20%, maybe that's extravagant in some organizations, but if you can give them time, then you've given them the physical opportunity, but you also need to give them the social opportunity. It has to be acceptable to do this, to spend time on things that might be seen as not productive in terms of profit generation today or delivering customer satisfaction today. It has to be socially acceptable within the organization to think that way. So the answer to the question, how do I encourage innovation, is you need to get people to change their behavior so that they think that way. And the only way you could get them to change is by motivating them, by giving them the capability and the opportunity, the time and the social acceptance to be able to work in that way and do that. And in that respect, I found Dr. Kellyanne Schmidt a very enlightening speaker.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we'll have to make her part of our panel sometime in the near future.
Yeah, well, I think she's from Chicago, so she'll fit right in with some of it.
Oh, perfect, perfect, excellent. All right, so we've got time for one last question, guys, and I'll throw it out as a jump ball between Brian and Tolga here. So, what KPIs do you use to track innovation? Like, how do we measure the effect of innovation? Anyone, go ahead. There it is. I throw it out there. One of you pick it up, please.
That's a tough one. I'm trying to think, is there a way to track it differently than that we track any other result? It's innovation should be tracked as a change in results. Whatever you're trying to innovate. So it depends on the innovation. In all reality, is the innovation going to change our customer satisfaction metrics? If so, do we have a good way to track that? Right. Is the innovation going to affect our ability to get product out the door? Again, we need a good way to track that. I think, probably to Alan's point a little bit, I think a lot of it is also, and a little different than the result side, is more based on culture. And can we track how many people are involved with innovation? I think that would probably be more interesting. And I think that's a tougher. I think some organizations already do that really well. If you're an organization that's been around a long time and hasn't innovated before, or that's not part of your normal strategy, I think that's a learning process. I think it comes into weekly meetings or a newsletter or some whiteboard innovation that's being worked on by teams of people and discussed. And just, are we getting anywhere? Are we finding things that work, or also things that don't work? That's still innovation. I think if you could metric that and just track who's involved, I think that's probably would be an interesting thing. A little more than my boring results answer.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, results is, I think when we look at KPIs, everything is, you got to create a baseline, right? That's the first thing. Decide what to track, create a baseline, innovate, and that's how you're going to measure, right? Measure the success of it. Here's where we were before, here's where we are after. And, I think that, results isn't a boring answer. That it's it's a good answer, right? And it ties back into our other presentation. Focus on the outcome, right? Let's focus on the outcome. Excellent. Well, gentlemen, it has been a pleasure speaking with you. I'm sure the audience, appreciated the insights that you shared. I know that there are more questions in the chat. We'll do our best to try to answer those offline. But I wanted to thank you again for joining our session, and I look forward to hopefully interacting in the next week or so with you guys again.
Okay. Thanks, Eric.
All right.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So as we wrap up our day here in, let me just go through the polls here again. Here we go. I want to wrap up our day with another quiz, right? We want to have another quiz. We want to give out more prizes. So today's quiz, and you can put your answers in the chat section. By what year will low-code application development be responsible for more than 65% of total application development activity? So please put your answers in the chat. We'll select those winners on tomorrow's session. And again, more encouragement for you to join that session tomorrow. So I also want to remind the audience to download our State of Low Code, No Code poll. This is a great global report of a global survey of over 1,000 business leaders. You can do so by clicking on the QR code here on the right-hand side of the screen. Also, would encourage you to try Creatio 7.18 now. So with the release of our latest 7.18, you can access that either by clicking on the QR code or going out to our website. You can download that free trial now and experience low code, no code right away. And also subscribe to our YouTube channel. A lot of great content out there available. So if you've liked the session so far within the Low Code Marathon, there's just a ton of additional information that's going to be out there on our YouTube channel. And finally, please register for our Low Code Talks. These are our podcasts, and you can subscribe to them on any of the platforms that you see here at the bottom of the screen. And I also would encourage you to join our session tomorrow. We have a day 4 of our Low Code Marathon, where we will be discussing how to create a low code company and how to roll out applications in days. So again, great lineup of speakers, great discussion that we're going to have. So I would encourage everybody to join tomorrow's session. And with that, I would like to wrap up our day. I'd say thank you to the audience. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I hope everybody gained some insight and some thoughts on low code. So thank you again, and enjoy your day.